Good morning. Cheers, everyone.
Morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Introducing Shawn over here. Hey, Shawn, how are you?
Doing okay? How you doing?
All righty. Yeah. Doing all right. It's the day before Record Store Day drops, and I'm busy, but it's cool. It's cool to be busy. It's cool to have
For
a really
Record
good,
Store Day drops, and I'm busy, but it's cool.
It's cool to be busy. It's cool to have a really good reason to have something to get done. And so, yeah. But anyway, I want to say thank you so much for joining today and and sharing some records that are true to your heart and things like that. I met Shawn because he's a vinyl champion and he comes in and shops here at RecordKrate, and even made an appointment for during these precious times that we're living in now. Yes. So, are you doing all right with the pandemic? Things are cool.
Oh yeah.
Work, cool things.
Yeah, everything's cool. We're just trying to stay home as much as we can. School with the kids has been a little bit interesting. With the move to online learning and all that, but we're getting through it.
Good. It's really great to see. Hopefully, more families be a little tighter.
Yeah,
and a little.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, you wanna go ahead and get started and show us some really cool stuff?
Sure.
All right.
I can. I think I'll probably start with those 12-inch singles I picked up from you, because that was just incredible.
It was incredible.
So, I picked these up not long ago, and I didn't really look them over too much because they were $2 a piece, and I owned both of these as a kid. I bought them at a little record shop in my hometown in California that catered to DJs. So something, like these 12-inch singles that just have, house mixes, club mixes, stuff like that. I mean, this is exactly the type of stuff that they sold. And so I had these that I would have bought these summer of '92. I would have been about 12 going on 13. And after I moved to the East Coast, very, very late '90s, I brought those with me and the other records that I had. I was one of those weird teenagers in the '90s that was still buying vinyl. And I can remember going to Tower Records and blowing an entire paycheck on new stuff on vinyl, and there wasn't a lot of it, but they were one of the places where you could still get it. But anyway, so I brought those 12-inch singles with me to the East Coast, and I ended up selling them. I can't remember if it was Luke's Record Exchange in Pawtucket, but sold it to one of those. I sold those 12-inch singles to one of those places, and so when I was shopping, I saw these and I was like, oh hey, I used to have both of these. What the hell? I'm gonna go ahead and pick these up because I kind of miss having these. And little did I realize that. So I don't know why, but back in the day, I know better now, but back in the day, I used to write my name, and as luck would have it, somehow you ended up with my let's see. You ended up with my copies, and you can see my name written in there. 12-year-old me would have wrote that, and the copy of Jam is the same thing. You can see my name written right in there like that. I could not believe it. I sold these, I bought these things 30 years ago in California. I sold them 20 years ago in Boston. Somehow they end up back with me. I swear I should have bought a Powerball ticket that day.
I should have, yeah. And it was so funny because I got a text from you and I was like, and so these records came from a DJ that used to play up and down Hillsborough Street in Raleigh, and time to get rid of stuff. And I probably got 400 that day. But and I just can't help but think about how many people heard that record and how many people danced to it
Oh yeah,
because she was a 12-year-old, purchased it in California, and it
yeah.
ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina.
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. There was a little bit of an internet burp there, but you said Luke's record and
yeah, Luke's Record Exchange in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. That's where I used to buy a lot of my used vinyl when I lived up in Providence. And Luke's is long closed now, but yeah, he was a great shop back then. And then occasionally, if I was going to make a trip into Boston, you got to remember a 45-minute drive in New England is like a day trip, because the states are so small up there. So like if I was going to make a day out of going to Boston and driving 45 minutes, then I'd always stop into Mystery Train. And up there, Mystery Train was one of those places where you just never knew what you were going to pull out of there. I mean, they had a couple of stores, and it was always fun going in there.
What was the second store in Rhode Island? You said Luke's, and then
that was the only one in Rhode Island. And then Mystery Train was in Boston.
Okay, great. So you may have sold the
so I may have sold it either to Luke's or to Mystery Train. I can't remember which one, but
well, very cool. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, it is. I'm elated to have these, but so yeah,
unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big world.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, who knows how they ended up down here, right? I mean, I don't know, but that's that was pretty cool.
So next time you're 12 years old, just put GPS on your records and we can follow it.
Yeah, totally. And the funny thing is, right, is that I still have, Dangerous was sort of the first, that's the Michael Jackson album that both of those songs came from. Mm-hmm. And Dangerous was actually the very first LP that I ever bought with my own money. I bought this one in 1991, right around the time of release. And I've managed to keep it for almost 30 years. It's still in really nice shape, and still sounds great. Still spin it regularly. This is my Michael Jackson album.
Very cool.
It's always been my favorite of his. Well,
the two 12 inches you purchased look much cleaner now. Did you clean them up?
No.
Oh,
No. They're the same as it was when I got them from you. But
okay.
Let's see here. Yeah.
That is so cool. What a wonderful story.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll go with my next love, jazz.
All righty.
So I'm a huge jazz guy. I mean, Adam, you know that as well as anybody. Jazz was one of those things that was sort of like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. I remember, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 years ago. No, it was longer than that, probably closer to 15. Because I didn't have any kids. But my wife used to skydive before we had kids. And so she was off one weekend, and I'd gone to Newberry Comics like I did regularly up there in Providence to go check out the new vinyl. And I noticed that they had one time when I went there, I noticed that they had a jazz section with a whole bunch of new jazz reissues and things. And, I had always kind of remembering that I grew up, in the 80s and through the 90s, jazz was sort of at its bottom during that time. And, there wasn't a lot of really great jazz that came out during that time. And so when somebody said the word jazz to me, I always thought of either 30s and 40s, like dance hall jazz, big band, Basie Ellington, that kind of thing, stuff that my grandparents liked. Mm-hmm. Or I thought of, schlocky, smooth jazz that was all over the radio in the 80s, not anything that a kid would really dig. Right. Yeah. And so, but for whatever reason, I remember I just started thumbing through those reissues, and, I was seeing the typical stuff, Miles Davis and Coltrane and Brubeck and all that. And I remember I stopped when I got to Charles Mingus's Mingus album, because beautiful I was into music and I had seen Mingus's name on countless lists of like greatest human beings to ever pick up a bass. And for whatever reason, I thought I was getting like a bass album, right? But I had $20 burning a hole in my pocket, so I went and I bought it, and I love the cover art. Those Neil Fujita cover art, you know, those were staples in Columbia jazz albums in the 50s. But I love the cover art, so I brought it home and I put it on, and here's this 10-piece ensemble, which Mingus would tell you was a small ensemble, but you know, here's this 10-piece ensemble, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, this is exactly why I don't like jazz. Like, I don't know. No, this is. And so when it was over, I said, yeah, this is granddad music. But then I said, you know what? Hold on. I said, if this was a rock album that didn't grab me on the first listen, I'd play it again. See if it did anything for me, right? So I played it again. I played it again. I played it again. And pretty soon, I think by like the 7th spin that night, I was like, wow, if this was granddad music, then granddad was pretty hip, because this is awesome. And at that point, that was sort of what sent me flying down the rabbit hole of jazz. And
now, did you have a cocktail with every 7th play? It got better because of the cocktails, or what was it?
I don't know, man. You know, it was like every time that I played it, something new jumped out at me. And it was one of those things where I think I had to change the way that I was listening a little bit. And I said, well, maybe what I need to do is listen to the individual players and listen to the musicianship, because this is all instrumental music. So, you know, maybe that's what I need to do. And that's when it started to catch me. You know, I remember the first thing that really jumped out at me, other than Mingus's bass playing, obviously, was like Danny Richmond's drums. Danny Richmond is, now that I've been listening to jazz for a long time, Danny Richmond is one of those guys that, like Art Blakey, I could be blindfolded. You can not tell me what album I'm listening to, and I can tell you if it's Art Blakey or Danny Richmond just by their time. And so, yeah, Danny Richmond really blew me away on that record. And, you know, I've long since replaced my old reissue with a, you know, with an original. It's an original mono, and it's in great shape. Sounds wonderful. And one thing I was very taken with this particular copy is that there's no writing on the back cover. Adam, I think you've been in the record business long enough to know that for whatever reason, people who owned old jazz records love to write on the back cover. They love to be their own critics or whatever it was they were doing. So,
do you still have that reissue you purchased?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, cool.
You know, that's one of the other things about me. And you know, I've had people call me crazy. I've also had people say, I wish I had your level of discipline. But you know, honestly, I'm one of those people that I don't keep 2 copies of anything, not even stereo or mono. If I upgrade something, my old one goes on to the dupe pile, and I'll sell it, or I'll use it for trade bait. You know, if a shop has something that I can't live without.
There you go. Let's say hello to a few people. Hey, good morning, Edward. Thanks for stopping by. Cheers. Edward loves lots of prog as well as psych and jazz also. Hey, good morning, Gina. How are you? Thanks for joining us this morning. I hope you're doing well. And here's Carson. Good morning, Carson. Cheers, Carson. Thanks for stopping by. Uh-oh. Carson retracted one of his. Oh, it's, yeah. There you go. There you go. Cool. Well, wow. How neat.
Yeah. And
was that the first? Wait a minute. So that particular record was a first for something. What was it? The first for, oh boy, help me out, Shawn. That Mingus record was the first. It wasn't the first record Columbia released, but it was the first of something.
So it was one of
3 records that year, right?
Yeah. So
that's what it was.
So, you know, 1959 was to jazz, I think, what 1967 was to rock. You know, and so 1959, you know, you had a whole bunch of jazz musicians that, you know, had felt like bebop was kind of stale. You know, Charlie Parker had been Charlie Parker was dead at this point, and it had been 10 years since bebop had really kind of come on the scene, and you had a lot of jazz musicians that were kind of asking themselves, what's next? What are we going to do next? Where's this music going? And I don't think it was intentional, but Columbia ended up releasing 3 of probably the most watershed jazz albums of all time, recorded and released in 1959, and Mingus was one of them, and of course Dave Brubeck's Time Out.
You'll see a lot of copies. You'll see a lot of different versions. You'll see a lot of different covers of that record. And Shawn,
because and that original cover is not terribly easy to find, because most people were buying that record after Take 5 became a huge hit, and they changed the cover to say featuring Take 5. Yeah,
and Shawn has the one that's the most desirable to find.
Oh yeah, this one. This is this, and speaking of writing on the cover, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, this thing. This is the gateway drug for so many people to jazz. There are a few gateway drug records that I tell people to listen to if you want to get into jazz. I give them Kind of Blue. I give them. Hang on. Let's see. Where is it? Nope. Hang on. I think this is it. Nope. That's no. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Yep. John Coltrane's one and only album for Blue Note, Blue Train.
Yeah. There you go.
Funny story behind that one, but I'll get there later.
Say good morning to a few people. Kurt, good morning,
yeah.
Kurt. There's some comments also. Yeah. Hey, good morning, Kurt. Cheers. Thanks for joining us. Yo, brothers and sisters of the Krate. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us. Cheers. And then we have Ross. Good morning, Russ. Cheers. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. People are saying good morning to each other. Oh yeah. Kind of Blue. Love it.
It's a classic for a reason. And it's even more amazing when you listen to it. Yes, West Coast jazz. I love West Coast stuff.
Time out.
Good stuff. Some of these jazz albums are also amazing too when you think The Shape of Jazz to Come came out in 1959. Giant Steps was actually 1960. So close enough, but yep, this is a nice original of Giant Steps with the Black Atlantic label. I love this. Killer album.
Good morning, Myra. Cheers. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's funny about Giant Steps is that it's kind of become a rite of passage for jazz musicians, because you're dealing with 12 keys, and you're dealing with a key change roughly every 2 beats on a song that's 200 and some odd beats a minute. It's insane. If you listen to Giant Steps and really listen to it, you can hear poor Tommy Flanagan, the piano player, holding on for dear life. And it's an amazing piece, but it's like, yeah, man, you play a mean sax, but can you solo in all 12 keys of Giant Steps?
There you go. Yeah. So this morning,
nice.
That's right. He got Giant Steps from me last week, and I think it was the 3rd edition.
Cool.
So joining us today is vinyl champion Shawn. Shawn's joining us on Record Store Day Drops 2020 Eve. There we go. Yeah. RecordKrate, home of jazz. Well, I think we all. So there's a lot of stores in the area that love jazz. There's some that can't touch it, but yeah. Hey, good morning, Analog Planet, thanks for joining us. Cheers. He is playing the B flat sax. Is he playing the B flat sax? I guess that Giant Steps.
I think so. I'm actually not entirely sure. That's a great question. Actually, I don't know. I believe so, though.
Yeah. Cool.
And I'm going to move on here in a little bit, but the other thing I wanted to hit on was with Kind of Blue and with most of these old jazz records, jazz musicians, the way that record companies dealt with jazz was completely different than how they dealt with other forms of music, because like when you look at something like Kind of Blue, or you look at something like like Time Out, none of those groups went into the studio with a whole bunch of stuff saying, yeah, man, we're going to just put together an album and it's going to be about this and we're going to do this with it and yada, yada, like a lot of rock guys. It was just a recording session that was scheduled that day. And that's what's so amazing, like especially Kind of Blue, is that, I mean, these were just compositions that people had, and they just brought them to the recording session and they just did it. I mean, most of Kind of Blue is the first take, and the entire thing was recorded in like 7 hours. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. One of my favorite things listening to the sessions is at the very beginning of that first track, So What, when you can hear Jimmy Cobb kind of scraping his brush across the snare drum, and you can hear the recording engineer tell Miles Davis, he says, "Hey Miles, can you ask your drummer to stop doing whatever he's doing, because I'm picking up some feedback in the recording chain." And Miles just kind of gets that raspy voice on and goes, "That's part of it."
Part of it. Yeah. They brought some ideas, some riffs, some stuff.
Yeah. And that's all it was. I mean, it was just a recording session scheduled that day. And, that's one thing that took me a little bit to get used to. Oh, hi, Michael. I know of you through the Jazz Vinyl Lovers group with Ken McAuliffe and all of that. Welcome.
Good morning, Stephen. I'm not a jazz fan. Cheers. Thanks for stopping for the most part. Here's proof. I love Vince, Gerardo, Bob. That's totally cool. That is some good stuff to love.
Hey, man, Vince Guaraldi, I'll tell you, I mean, I've got some of his fantasy recordings from the 60s, and I really like those. And I mean, A Charlie Brown Christmas is one of my favorite jazz records for any season of all time.
Yeah. Shawn, I was just texting you that information that Stephen shared on stage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go.
Thanks
for sharing that, Stephen. Yeah.
So, that was another thing that I found very interesting about jazz, is how important record label is on jazz recordings, because so many of those labels had their own sound. Blue Note specifically. I mean, somebody could put a Blue Note album down on the turntable and it's a Blue Note album before you even know whose record it is. That's another facet that I always found interesting. But anyway, we can move on. We can move on from jazz. We'll go
whatever
back
you like
to.
It's cool with me. I could listen to you talk about jazz all day long, because. Yeah.
And believe me, I could carry a conversation about jazz all day long.
Absolutely, I could hang out with you all day with that too.
So, I'll go back to the 90s. Again, I was one of those, I graduated high school in 97. And so all throughout my teenage years, I was one of those weird kids that, I bought CDs like everybody did back then, but I was buying a lot of new albums on vinyl back then too. And there wasn't a ton of it pressed. A lot of times, for vinyl in the 90s, the record companies would take, the biggest of the big albums that they knew they could sell. And, they'd press up 5,000 or 10,000 of them. And when they were gone, they were gone. They were just there for the fans. And the hilarious thing that still boggles my mind is how much some of these records go for on the used market these days. Like, I pity somebody who is trying to collect this stuff today. I mean, thankfully, Yeah, I think by lucky stars, I just paid, $15.98 or whatever the retail price was for a lot of this stuff. But my God, the prices on the used market for some of this 90s vinyl is insane. And the reissues haven't done anything really to bring down the prices in a lot of cases. That's what's even more shocking. Like if there had been no reissues, I could kind of understand because like it was the only option you had to get the stuff on vinyl. But with the reissues out now, I mean, it's just amazing to me that the cost of these originals on the used market still haven't come down a whole lot. But I'll go over some of my favorites from the time that I was buying during the 90s. If you ever find this album, don't pass it up. If you like 90s rock, Swerve Driver's 99. This record is so good. And I mean, pretty much anything Swerve Driver's put out, even into the modern time, has been great. But this one in particular is just fantastic. This is one, and here's an example of one that goes for stupid money these days. That I remember I did pay more for this because it's a UK pressing, so it was a quote unquote import. So Tower Records like to make a little extra profit on those, but
oh yeah.
And this one's it's a numbered one, so
very cool.
Yep. And then on that same note, got an original Siamese Dream here. This was interesting for the period. This came out in '93, and this was one where they actually pressed up a few hundred copies on various colors of vinyl. So I think there were like 300 in purple, 300 in orange, 300 in green, or something like that. This one is orange. It's the orange marble.
Good stuff, Gina. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's see. I've got all of REM's 90s albums that I bought back then. So Out of Time, Automatic for the People. There's Automatic. Got Monster. It's an original.
Do you have that hip hop record that had REM misprinted on?
No. I don't.
Who's the group? I can't remember now, but
this is my probably my some days I would tell you this is my favorite REM album, New Adventures in Hi-Fi. This is an original from '96. And let's see here. Anytime's the right time for Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville.
Oh yeah.
This is an original from '93.
Thank God that's available today for people.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain albums from the '90s that just have to always be in print, and that's one of them. That record is killer. Pearl Jam is another one. I've got originals of all of their '90s stuff. Is an original of 10. Interestingly, even though 10 came out in 1991, it actually didn't see its first vinyl release until 1994, after Versus came out. And interesting story behind that. So Versus, if you look, believe it or not, the LP, and we're talking 1993 now, the LP was actually available a week before the CD was. And the LP was sent to manufacturing before they had settled on an album title. So if you look on the original copies of Versus, you will not find the name Versus anywhere on the album cover. All it says is Pearl Jam. Even on the spine, it just says, you can see it there. On the left, it just says Pearl Jam. But Versus sold enough copies on vinyl that they said, oh, well, you know what? Maybe people are actually still interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's when they went and they pressed up 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. I remember selling that one. Myra asked, do you have Talking Heads? I think it was an album, Heaven, that was textured.
I do have Talking Heads' entire discography. Let me, I believe I know the one that she's talking about.
Yeah.
Hang on here.
Stephen was asking, did the Pearl Jams have Versus on the label?
Nope. Nope. On the labels, all it says is Pearl Jam. Here, I'll pull it out real quick just so you can see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you can see the label. It just says Pearl Jam.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah, something else to note about that that Smashing Pumpkins Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness is that those original vinyl pressings actually have the tracks in a completely different order, and it also has either one or two tracks that were not on the CD, and the original vinyl is the only time that the album was ever released that way. The newer reissues. The newer reissues use the CD running order, which I thought was interesting. Okay, so Talking Heads. Let's see. That's over here. Here we go. Is this the one? No. I have their whole studio discography, but that's... Oh. So the textured one is this one, Fear of Music.
Fear of Music.
And I have, of course, I have this. I was born in 1979, so I love having great albums from 1979. And yeah, this is it's really hard to see on here, but it's like yeah, it's like metal.
It's like the chrome diamond for your trucks.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what it is. Yeah,
for trucks, not necessarily your truck, but trucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I love Talking Heads. I could listen to them over and over and over until my ears bleed. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carson.
Yes, that's it. Hey, let's say good morning to another Shawn. Good morning, Shawn. Cheers. How are you?
Good morning. This is another great one from the 90s that I still listen to regularly. Original from '91 of Ozzy Osbourne's "No More Tears."
There you go. See you tomorrow, Kurt. Have a good day. No more tears. I'm sorry, I didn't have you isolated.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
Let's see. This one. So I have two 90s 9 Inch Nails vinyl. I've got original of the Downward Spiral, and and then also an original of the Fragile. And what I found, and the Fragile was another one where the tracks were in a completely different order than the CD, and it had music that wasn't on the CD. And I always said to myself, leave it to Trent Reznor in 1999 to be the guy that makes the definitive version of his album on vinyl. But the thing with the Downward Spiral, which I found interesting, is that these US pressings were only promo. And somehow a bunch of these promo copies got to smaller record stores at the time that were still selling vinyl, because I bought this in a record store in shrink wrap, but if you look at the labels, it says for promotional use only. And doing a little bit of research online, these were there absolutely was not any kind of general market copy. So I don't know how all those promo copies ended up at record shops, but there were definitely some that made them, because I bought it at a record shop brand new.
I've always said that there's some records that every time I see them, it's a promo, and I've always said that. Not Trent or not 9 Inch Nails, but like some of the stuff from the 70s. I'm like, every time I see it's promo, I like to see one that's not a promo. That would be the rare one.
Right. And I have some albums like that as well, where there were stock copies, but they sold so bad that that like promo copies are easier to find than stock market copies. This is a good example of that. Hang on, where is it? Yeah, this one. Gene Parsons' album, Kindling. Promo copies of this are way easier to find than stock market copies. For those who don't know who Gene Parsons is, he's a drummer on the country rock scene in the early 70s and in the late 60s. He was the drummer for the Byrds for a long time. He played in the Flying Burrito Brothers. He played, he did a couple of solo albums. He's been all over that scene. This is a fantastic album. If you like 70s country rock and you find a copy of this, don't pass it up. It's fantastic. It really is.
Cool. So Shawn had a question. He says, I don't think they've repressed No More Tears yet. I think it's only within the Ozzy recent massive box set.
I believe that's true, and that really surprises me. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just Sharon wanting to maximize how much is going into the coffers. I don't know, but yeah, I really hope that they'll just reissue all of Ozzy's solo albums as just individual things that you can buy. Because, especially the 90s and the 2000s stuff, Osmosis and, that stuff. I mean, there were originals, but they're so expensive. Like,
I like to see some of the reissues with some more credits on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carson says, what do you think about the controversial Jimmy Page Led Zeppelin remasters?
So I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of them. And I think, a lot of it is just those master tapes that they used were played to death. So there's a lot of overdriving, especially on Led Zeppelin 2. Like if you listen to the instrumental break, in Heartbreaker, as the song keeps getting louder and louder, I mean, you can just hear the overdriving on that. And it's just from the tape being worn out. I mean, so yeah. Led Zeppelin is one of those bands where I took the time and sought out originals. Usually Zeppelin originals are not that hard to find and they're not that expensive because, there were 11 bajillion of them sold. The only expensive one was the Bob Ludwig cut of Led Zeppelin 2. But I mean, once you hear that, you'll never hear that album the same way again. I've been around this scene long enough to know that, people that have rare records will always tell you that's the one you want. That's the one that sounds the best, But in that case, it's really true. Bob Ludwig's cut of Led Zeppelin 2 is so hot and it is so thick. When Whole Lotta Love starts and you got that guitar going and then John Paul Jones comes in with his bass and just boom, boom, boom. Man, if you've got the volume up, I mean, even without a subwoofer, that will rattle your windows.
There you go.
So good.
Parsons, was he the string bender inventor?
He was, yes. Him and Clarence White. Yes, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Talking about records that we only see promo British power pop band The Keys. Seen 100 copies.
Yeah.
And 99 have been promos.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Definitely.
Did Parsons also drum for CCR?
It wouldn't shock me. I mean, Gene Parsons has been around. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I can't say that for sure, but I'll just go over. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Hey, good morning, Ron. Cheers. Thanks for joining us.
Nice. Very nice. And going back to the Bob Ludwig cut of Zeppelin 2, there are people that know what they have and will list them for $150 on Discogs or something. But I'll tell you what, there are still plenty of stories out there of people finding copies with RL and the dead wax on both sides for $5-10 at flea markets and yard sales. And just real quick for anybody that doesn't really know what that's all about. Bob Ludwig is a legendary mastering engineer. And when he was young, early in his career, he did the original US cut of Led Zeppelin 2. The first 500,000 that were cut were done from his master. And he cut it so hot that it was actually causing really super cheap turntables to skip. And one of the people that owned said cheap turntable happened to be the daughter of Ahmet Ertegun, who was the president of Atlantic Records. And so he got really mad about that and had Bob Ludwig's cut removed, and he had it remastered, cut down on the bass, and just generally a more muted kind of sound that would be a lot more compatible with both cheap equipment and expensive equipment. And so, yeah, so that's the story behind it.
Have you heard the UK pressing of that record?
I have not.
I haven't either. I would love to hear it. Yeah.
So I'll just grab another couple of them.
Speaking of the Birds, Russ ordered the first Skip Batten solo album.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't think I've ever heard that, but I will say that my favorite era of the Byrds are the latter day Byrds with Gene Parsons and Clarence White and Skip Batten, with McGuinn. Those albums like Ballad of Easy Rider and Untitled, great stuff. Great stuff. This is
for joining everybody. I appreciate you being here with us, and thank you, Shawn, for being my guest today.
Yeah, of course. So this is a Columbia House pressing from '91. My dad had joined Columbia House back then and ended up grabbing this. Interestingly, the Columbia House pressings did not include the custom inner sleeve, which I didn't find that out until years later. But this just has a plain white inner sleeve, and apparently that was not uncommon for Columbia House pressings back in the day. So yeah. And then all right, and then the last one on the 90s before I move on. This was something that I bought because of something I saw on VH1 back when I was a teenager. So I don't remember if it was Behind the Music or what, but they were doing some sort of a documentary on John Mellencamp. And at the end of that documentary, they started talking about his quote unquote new album, which was this one, it's self-titled, came out in '98. And I remember him saying in the documentary, yeah, we just signed to Columbia Records. And I told everybody in the band that, we're now playing for, the greatest record label in history, and we've really got to deliver. And I remember being at Tower Records not long after seeing that, and I found that album in the bin and picked it up, turned it around, saw a Columbia logo on the back of it, and I said, let's see if they delivered. And they did. That's a killer album.
Oh, very cool. Some comments. Yeah, have you watched the In the Groove channel, which compares all the pressings of records of a record, Led Zeppelin 2 included, US, UK, Ludwig, Page, Classic, blah, blah, blah. I have not. Carson, why don't you put a link in the chat, and then that way we can all watch it. Gene Clark's No Other album must be.
Oh, yeah. Gene Clark was a one-man Beatles.
Are you guys familiar with the Kiss, the originals, which had the first three? Yes, absolutely. We have Michael and Adam, Michael Edwards and Adam NC, who enjoys Kiss, and they chime in also.
Yeah, believe it or not, the only Kiss albums I have on vinyl are the ones my dad had. It's only the solo albums. That set of four from the late '70s where each one of them did a solo album, and my dad's copies still have the posters. They've still got the merch forms, all that kind of stuff. They're all in pretty good shape still. And so yeah, he never had any of Kiss's actual band albums, but he had those 4 solo albums. I don't know why, but
wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So, another genre of music that I've been into off and on over the years and am definitely turned back onto in recent times is hardcore punk from the 80s. Something about the energy and the fire in the blood that you get from listening to some of that stuff is just awesome. And at 41 years old, you figure I would have outgrown it, but no, I haven't. Anybody that came up in the 80s, if you were into skateboarding at all, you might remember an artist named Pusshead. His name's Brian Schroeder, and he did his own line of Zorlac skateboards with his own custom artwork in the 80s. And in addition, he actually designed tour merchandise for Metallica and the Misfits and some others. And so he has had a pretty illustrious career as an artist. But this is an album from the band that he started called Septic Death. They were a band for about 5 years in Boise, Idaho, of all places. You know, where's a hardcore punk band going to play in Boise, Idaho, right? So they didn't get out too far. They didn't play live a lot, but their music took off like wildfire in the scene, and a lot of people that are really into hardcore love Septic Death, and finding Septic Death original vinyl is a unicorn. So I'm very happy to have this. It's a great record. It rips top to bottom.
Very
really
cool.
tough.
A name I haven't heard in years.
What?
The guys.
Oh, Puffhead?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that in years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Emmett Rhodes was the one-man Beatles, so I'm confused.
He's a contender, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
He did record his first album in his garage, and he played all the instruments.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for the link, Carson. Mike says that he's a unicorn.
Nice. Bonus points if you have sparkles and rainbows. Here's a 76 original of the first Ramones album. You know, I don't think I can say anything about this album that hasn't already been said, but I feel like I sort of feel like the Ramones were to the 70s what the Velvet Underground was to the 60s, where, you know, nobody really bought their albums in the time, but they were hugely influential. I think, it was Brian Eno that said one time he was talking to Lou Reed, and he told him that the first Velvet Underground album only sold 35,000 copies, the Banana album. It only sold 35,000 copies in the first 5 years. And of course, that still went on to be plenty important. And Brian Eno said, yeah, because, you know, every single one of those 35,000 people probably went and started a band after hearing that record. And I feel like the Ramones were that type of band too. You know, it was two chords, right? Even if you were a teenager that was just learning the guitar, you know, you could put that on put that on your parents' hi-fi or whatever and just sit and play along.
You could put that on and play along with it. Looks like Shawn.
Yeah. Some other.
Hey, Shawn, you might want to repeat that.
What's that?
You might want to repeat that about the Velvet Underground. We had a little bit of a burp here.
Oh yeah, so you know the Velvet Underground. That first album of theirs, Brian Eno said he was talking to Lou Reed, and Lou Reed told him that the Velvet Underground, the first album, the Andy Warhol Banana album, only sold about 35,000 copies in the first 5 years. And of course, it still went on to become extremely important. And Brian Eno said it was important because all 35,000 people that bought it probably started a band. And, the Ramones were much the same thing. It was two chords, and you could put that on and play along with the record. And how many people learned to play guitar from listening to the Ramones? And, was it anything special? No, it wasn't. It was very simple, and that's exactly what it was. And that was the great thing about it, was that it was unpretentious. It was just a bunch of guys that like to turn their guitars up to 11 and jam.
Absolutely. Yeah. They did it. The important thing is that they did it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then I would be remiss to not show off for hardcore this record. Capital Punishment is actually a hardcore band from my hometown, Fresno, California. And they were Fresno actually had a decent hardcore scene in the 80s. There were several bands. Capital Punishment was probably the one that got the most exposure. But when Putsch comes to shove, it's the German word for a coup d'etat. This is a killer record, ripper top to bottom. And then I've also got for hardcore, 7-inch was always a very popular format because it was cheap to produce, it was cheap to sell, it was cheap to buy. And so
And you carry a bunch of them in your book bag. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Hey,
this
good
is
morning, T. Thanks for joining us. Sorry about that, Shawn.
Oh, no, you're good. Good morning. Yeah, so this is a compilation of 6 bands from Fresno that the sort of the 6 best bands that the scene had to offer at the time: Sad Boys, Capital Punishment, Plaid Retina, Condemnations, Slut Vinyl, and Addicted Children. This is a great compilation. And then just a couple of quick, my favorite 7 inches: United Mutation, No Comment, Mech Mensch EP. Interesting about this was produced by Butch Vig in 1983. Butch Vig would, of course, go on to produce Nevermind and Siamese Dream and most other 90s grunge albums that people still remember and care about. And this was a local band in Madison, Wisconsin, and he produced this in 1983. Infest is a staple in hardcore. I mean, even to this day, people that are into that stuff, they love Infest. This band as well, Discharge. This is UK punk. It's great stuff. The Avengers, American group, late 70s. The bassist in this, a guy named James Calvin Wilsey, would go on to be in Chris Isaac's band throughout the 80s and into the 90s. Asocial, Religion Sucks EP, killer. And lastly, this is a split 7-inch, which was popular in hardcore too, where you'd have 2 bands and you'd have 1 band per side. So this is a split 7-inch with Artificial Peace and another band called Exiled. And this is a killer disc as well. So yeah, hardcore is fun. I enjoy it. And it was, I feel like in the 80s, punk was one of the genres that still had something to say. So
Steven says, I think Butch was a member of Spooner when he produced that single.
You might be right. It was definitely around that time. Yeah.
I live close to Madison, Wisconsin. And Shawn, you can attest to this. The cool thing about those 7 inches, bands would travel, they would be able to sell a 7 inch at merch table. Yeah. It was usually $3, $4, $5 at the most. And the cool thing is they didn't have elaborate sleeves. A lot of their sleeves was white generic, and then it had a fold that was done on a Z-Rock. They would stuff in all sorts of things. You would get stickers, you would get catalogs, you would get order forms.
Absolutely. And that is one of the coolest things about punk vinyl from that time. If you like punk records, it's the DIY ethos of punk at its finest.
Yeah.
I mean, these bands would photocopy, these collages that they'd put together, and they'd include it as an insert. And you're right, they'd have the fold over sleeves and all that because it was cheap. And
not only punk and hardcore, but the indie bands that were chopping around, they did the same thing. And I've shared it before, folks. But if it wasn't for hip hop, and if it wasn't for DIY bands, and if it wasn't for Crosley, vinyl wouldn't be as popular as it is now.
Yeah,
because those cats kept the vinyl pressings happening.
Without a doubt.
Crosley released a record player that you could get again, and so there you go. And it was a great stepping stone because she could end up getting a nicer table. Yeah. What? No Elvis Hitler? Hey, good morning, TC. Thanks for joining us.
Elvis Hitler, man. Sure, them and Jesus Chrysler.
Yeah. What was the brand of the outer sleeve on the? What was the band on the first 7 you showed? What was the band?
This one. So this was the first 7-inch I showed. This is actually a compilation. So it's called World Gone to Shreds Volume 3 Fresno. And this is a collection of hardcore bands. This came out in 1989. And it's a collection of hardcore bands from my hometown. And so there are 6 songs on this from 6 different bands. So you got the Sad Boys, Capital Punishment, Plaid Retina, Condemnation, Slut Vinyl, and Abducted Children. So those are the 6 bands. This copy is neat too because it's on peach vinyl, and there were 100 of these made, and they were actually given to the members of the individual bands that appear on this compilation. And so this is a neat. I mean, it's a great disc. I love it, especially Capital Punishment's song that they contributed to this called Liquor Store, killer song. And yeah, so not only is it a great disc, but it's also a cool piece of history from my hometown. So
there you go. Well, thanks for sharing that again. However, Carson says no, the plastic outer sleeve brand.
Oh, okay. So you know what? I actually do not know what this plastic outer sleeve brand is. The guy that sold this to me had it in this already. So I actually don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so there you go. One day I'll have to show a bunch of 7s that are like that. And I was just thinking as he was showing it was peach. I bet you anything these record pressing plants were like, man, we got a whole bunch of that peach color left over there. What can we do? You know what? We'll give you a discount if you get it on peach.
Yeah. So speaking of like inserts and things, right, and how they'd stuff all kinds of stuff in there, this United Mutations disc is really neat. And this is, I mean, totally something from the Reagan era, right? Something that only could have come from the Reagan era, from the Reagan years. So, you know, you've got the vinyl, of course, right? You've got the disc. But then, you know, it's, here, let me take everything out of here. So you've got, you know, you've got the front and back of the sleeve, but it folds out. And you've got this little, you know, piece of artwork. And then for the inserts, I thought this was interesting. So, you know, this is clearly, so on one side, it's lyrics and a photo, right? On the other side, it's like a photocopied collage that someone made, a question aimed at mankind, right? And, you know, just things like this are just so neat to me. And then the coolest thing that was included in this United Mutations disc is 2 perforated postcards, stop nuclear testing, and then on the other side, this.
Oh.
And if you look at this, these postcards, one is addressed to Konstantin Chernenko, who was in charge of the Soviet Republic at the time, with a message asking him to stop nuclear testing. And then on the other side was one addressed to President Reagan with the exact same message. Like, how cool is that?
It is very cool. And into the 80s, we had a lot of forward thinkers like that. I think Michael Stipe was very, you know, shared his thoughts and let's make a calls. And then, you know, gosh, I'm thinking so many things in Africa that we were concerned about. And not only environmental, but political. Yeah. Amnesty International rising up and things like that. But hey, that's totally cool. Shawn, we got about 5 more minutes. And then, of course, you know, it seems like we just got started. We'll have to continue another day.
Yeah.
But
no doubt.
Yeah, sure. All right. Lay it on.
So last thing, then I'll use my final couple of minutes and I'll go with some thrash, right? I love some 80s thrash. So, you know, there's generally 4 bands that are considered the big 4 of thrash. That would be Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Metallica. So I figured I'd do 4 by the big 4. So you've got for Slayer, you know, these are all originals. Got a nice copy, very nice copy of Rain and Blood. Nice copy of South of Heaven. 1990 original of Seasons in the Abyss. And a 1994 original of Divine Intervention. And then let's see. Next up, guess we can do Metallica. So this is an original of Kill 'Em All on the on Megaforce. This is an original of Ride the Lightning, also on Megaforce. Still has the merch sleeve with it. Ride the Lightning is really tough to find on Megaforce, definitely harder than Kill 'Em All because it was only in print for about 4 months. This came out in July, and by November they had signed to Elektra Records, and Elektra had the Megaforce copies recalled and pulled, and then they reissued it on Elektra. So this was only in print for about 4 months. So yeah, so got that. Nice original of Master of Puppets. And lastly, since we're doing studio albums, an original of And Justice for All. And my favorite thing about And Justice for All, well, other than the fact that it's a great record, is this hype sticker.
Oh.
Because if we put it on one LP, it would sound like beep. So yeah. And then we move on to Megadeth. So there's a nice original copy of Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? And then so far so good. So what? This is actually a BMG Record Club pressing that had an interesting misprinted label, and it used the old Megadeth logo, the one that they had before this. So I thought that was kind of cool. 1990 original of Rust in Peace, U.S. pressing. And then this one was never pressed on vinyl originally in the U.S., but this is Countdown to Extinction. Hello. But yeah, this was never pressed in the US in '92 on vinyl. So this is actually an Italian pressing that sounds fantastic. Great record. It's one of my favorite Megadeth albums. And then lastly, the Thrashers from New York, Anthrax. Nice original of Spreading the Disease. And Among the Living. State of Euphoria, and original from 1990 of Persistence of Time. So, and yeah, so.
Yeah. Shawn has a question. Do you have Balance by Van Halen?
I do not. I have a bunch of Van Halen records, but I've also got a lot of holes. Most of the Van Halen stuff I have is actually the stuff that my dad had. You know, the first album, Van Halen 2, Women and Children First. You know, the earlier stuff. I went out on my own later and bought some of the Sammy Hagar albums, 5150 and OU 812 and all that stuff. But yeah, no, I do not have Balance.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, cool. Wow. That's awesome. But it seems that your library is very balanced.
Yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of the classic rock staples and country and all of that. And you know, if we do this again, maybe I'll get into some of that. But yeah, I mean, you know, I've got a pretty wide music taste. I always have, and you know, it keeps listening to music fun.
Absolutely. And it's always fun to discover something we didn't know about, even if it's 20, 30, 40, 50 years old.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
So I love that. And one thing I like when Shawn comes in, he's not afraid to look at the jazz and say, well, I'm not familiar with this, but it looks interesting. And then, bam, before you know it, you discover something new. Oh, and yeah. I'm looking forward to your next appearance, Shawn, to see some beautiful records by the beautiful Julie London.
Now I do have plenty of those. I do love Julie London. Man, I would listen to that woman sing the phone book.
That's right. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for joining us this morning. And looks like Mike and Carson are sharing some notes together, which is awesome. But thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. If you're going out to Record Store Day drops tomorrow, be sure to reach out to your record store. Things are different, folks. So you want to make sure and see how they're handling things. You don't want to show up with any surprises or anything like that. And I'll be in Wake Forest tomorrow, making it happen there. And remember, you can call me at 1 p.m. East Coast time, and you can do telephone shopping for Record Store Day Drops 2020 and cool things like that. But I do appreciate everybody coming by. Here's another question. Do you have dead Kennedys?
I do. If you can afford me an extra minute, I can go grab 1 7-inch of theirs that I have.
Oh, yeah.
All right, hold on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God bless. Let's see. I see guitars. What's another thing I see? What is that icon?
You'll have to forgive the profanity on the front cover, but yes, I do have this one.
How rare is that?
You know, it's not super rare. On the used market, these will usually fetch about $20. This is a UK pressing, actually. It was pressed in the US. IRS records put it out, but this is a UK pressing, and it's got a lyric insert and all that. So, but yeah, that is the only thing from the Kennedys that I have. That is a gaping hole in my punk library. I need more dead Kennedys. I will get there eventually, but yes, this is the one I have.
Alan C. Records found some dead Kennedys at a yard sale more recently, and I want him to come on live and mute him, and I want to watch him listen to the dead Kennedys.
Oh man, that I would love to see that, because the dead Kennedys were great, man.
Yeah, and Alan's not familiar with them, but he picked them up because he had heard the name and record covers, old records, blah 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 blah. So yeah, there we go. Hey, everybody, have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend, rock and roll, and thank you, Shawn. Thank you, everybody. And
my pleasure.
I'll be back tomorrow morning doing Coffee and Vinyl from Wake Forest, and Edward's going to be with me, and so he's going to be hanging out, modding, pretty much carrying the show so that I can do things, and I'll chime in from time to time and cool things like that. So, hey, take care, everybody. Have a good day. Rock and roll.
Have a good one.